Welcome back to Planet Brief, your free, accurate, no-drama weather source covering the United States, Canada, and the tropics. I'm glad you are here, and I want to ask you right at the top, if you find this kind of detailed, data-driven weather coverage useful, please hit the like button and subscribe. It takes 3 seconds, it costs you nothing, and it is the single best way to make sure our next update lands in your feed before the next storm lands in your backyard. Now, let's talk about June 2026, because there's a lot happening, and some of it is being misrepresented elsewhere. I want to give you the full picture. We have a significant atmospheric pattern locked in place over North America right now. We have a typhoon on the other side of the planet that is directly going to affect your weather later this month. We have one of the most active tropical seasons the East Pacific has seen in years, and a nearly silent Atlantic that has social media buzzing with false rumors. And scattered across all of that, we have specific, actionable, severe weather and flooding threats for this week. Let's go through all of it. The first thing you need to understand about the current setup is the feature that is driving almost everything happening right now. It is called an omega block. If you're not familiar with the term, here is the simple version. A normal weather pattern flows roughly from west to east. Storm systems develop in the Pacific, move across the Rockies, cross the plains, move through this Midwest, and exit off the East Coast. That is the typical progression, and it means no single area stays stuck in the same weather for too long. An omega block breaks that progression. It is a configuration where a large, powerful ridge of high pressure sits in the middle of the continent, in this case, straddling southern Canada and the upper Midwest, and acts as a roadblock. Weather systems approaching from the west cannot push through it. They get deflected and spin slowly in place. Systems to the east are cut off from any incoming flow. On a weather map, this arrangement of the high in the center and lows on either side looks like the Greek letter omega, and that shape is exactly what we are seeing on our upper-level analysis maps right now. What does this mean practically? It means several things simultaneously. The central part of the block, roughly the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes and southern Canada, stays relatively dry and calm. This is the dome of the omega. People under it may notice the weather feels settled and warm for an unusually long stretch, but the edges of the block are a different story. On the western side, troughs that would normally progress eastward are getting dammed up against the block. Those trapped troughs are producing heavy rainfall and flooding along their position, which right now is sitting over Montana and the northern Rockies. On the eastern side, moisture streaming north from the Gulf of Mexico has nowhere to go but up, producing persistent torrential downpours across the deep south. And along the southern periphery of the block, where the ridge meets the warm, unstable air streaming out of the Gulf, we have the setup for severe weather. That is where the most immediate threat is for the days ahead. For viewers in the Central Plains, the Southern Plains, and the Midwest, this is your most time-sensitive information. Through the early days of June, the southern edge of the omega block is creating a corridor of atmospheric instability that stretches from the Texas Panhandle northeast through Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and into portions of the upper Midwest. The ingredients for organized severe weather are all present. Gulf moisture streaming north at the surface, a dry line to the west separating that moisture from drier air, and sufficient wind shear from the jet stream overhead to give developing thunderstorms rotation. The Storm Prediction Center has been highlighting this corridor in their daily outlooks. The primary threats are damaging winds, large hail, and isolated tornadoes. I want to be honest about the tornado component. It is not zero, but it is not the dominant threat in most of this setup. The instability and shear values favor supercell thunderstorms capable of producing significant hail. We are talking golf ball to baseball-sized hail in the strongest storms, and damaging straight-line winds that can exceed 70 miles per hour in organized line segments. The most acute time windows right now are afternoon and early evening on the active days, when daytime heating builds instability to its peak. If you are in western Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, Kansas, or southern Nebraska during those time windows and you see a severe thunderstorm watch issued for your county, take it seriously. Move vehicles under cover if you have it. Large hail causes insurance claims in the hundreds of millions of dollars in events like this. For the Midwest specifically, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, the timing shifts to the tail end of this early June window. The severe weather threat here comes from organized squall lines moving eastward during overnight and morning hours. Overnight, severe weather deserves the same respect as a daytime event. Make sure your weather alerts are active on your phone. Beneath the southern ridge of the omega block, temperatures are running significantly above normal across the southern plains. Oklahoma City is approaching or exceeding record high temperatures for the date, with afternoon readings pushing into the upper 90s to near 100 degrees Fahrenheit in early June, readings more typical of peak July. West Texas is similarly hot, with the added dimension of strong, dry winds. When heat and wind combine in an arid environment, fire weather conditions develop rapidly. The The red flag conditions being flagged by local National Weather Service offices across West Texas and eastern New Mexico reflect a serious fire threat. Any ignition source during afternoon hours this week can produce rapidly spreading fires in cured grass and brush. If you are in those areas, if you see smoke, report it early. Do not use power equipment or make open fires during the peak afternoon wind window. This is not a suggestion. Red flag conditions have produced major fire events in the past, and they can do so again. For the windiest conditions through midweek, the areas to watch are the elevated terrain of the southern high plains and the corridor immediately ahead of any dryline position. Wind gusts of 45 to 55 miles per hour will be common in these areas, with isolated gusts to 65 on the most active days. While the severe weather gets the dramatic headlines, flooding is often the deadlier and more economically damaging hazard in a pattern like this. And right now, 2 areas are at elevated flood risk. Montana and the northern Rockies are sitting at the western edge of the Omega Block, where the dam trough is producing persistent, organized rainfall over a multi-day period. This is the type of setup that produces slow-build flooding in mountain streams and river valleys, rather than the explosive flash flooding of the plains. The Clark Fork, the Flathead, and other river systems in western Montana are already running above normal from snowmelt. Multiple rounds of organized rainfall arriving over the same river basins over several days will push river levels higher, and potentially to flood stage at downstream communities. If you live in river valleys in western Montana or northern Idaho, monitor your local National Weather Service river forecasts at water. Weather.gov, know your floodplain status, know your evacuation route before you need it. The Deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, is sitting on the eastern side of the Omega Block's southern boundary where Gulf moisture is piling up against the stationary pattern. Convection is training over the same areas repeatedly, meaning storm cells form over the Gulf, move inland, and are followed immediately by another cell forming and tracking the same path. This training pattern is the most efficient rainfall producer in the atmosphere, and it is producing localized totals of 4 to 8 inches in short time frames in parts of this region. Urban drainage systems in New Orleans, Mobile, Pensacola, and Baton Rouge are vulnerable. If you are in the Deep South this week and heavy rain is in the forecast, know your low-lying roads and underpasses. Moving water on a road is always more dangerous than it looks. Here is the forecast story that goes beyond this week, and it starts in the West Pacific. Typhoon Jingi has developed into a powerful tropical cyclone in the waters west of the international dateline. Over the coming days, Jingi is forecast to recurve, to turn from its initial westward track toward a northeastward track as it is pulled into the mid-latitude circulation of the North Pacific. For the people of the Philippines and Japan, track this storm closely through your official meteorological agencies. Its landfall or close approach potential for parts of East Asia must be your priority. But here's why Jingi matters for North American weather in late June. When a powerful typhoon recurves and undergoes extratropical transition, it releases an enormous burst of latent heat energy into the upper-level circulation of the North Pacific. Think of it as a piston injecting heat into the jet stream machinery. That energy injection reshapes the atmospheric wave pattern across the entire Pacific basin, and, through downstream teleconnection, alters the ridge-trough structure across North America within approximately 7 to 14 days. The current model consensus, and I want to emphasize this is a long-range signal with inherent uncertainty, is that Jingi's recurvature will act as a trigger to build a new, strong ridge of high pressure along the west coast of the United States in the 3rd and 4th weeks of June. That west coast ridge will be the dominant feature of the late June pattern. What does that mean for different regions? For the Pacific coast, California, Oregon, and Washington, a building west coast ridge means dry, warm, and possibly very warm conditions. After a volatile spring, late June may bring the first extended settled pattern of the season. But given the 2026 Super El Niño background warming of the atmosphere, warm on the west coast this summer carries more extreme potential than it did in previous years. For the central and eastern United States, the west coast ridge repositions the jet stream and changes the character of the summer pattern. Rather than the Omega Block configuration we have right now, the late June pattern is likely to feature a more progressive, active flow across the plains and Midwest, reopening a significant severe weather window for those regions after a mid-month lull. If you're in the plains or Midwest and thinking the active severe weather period is wrapping up for summer, it is not. The mid-June period may be relatively quiet as the pattern transitions. But late June brings a new setup. Stay engaged with your forecast. Let's address the tropics directly, because there's a lot of misinformation circulating right now. East Pacific Basin. The Eastern Pacific tropical season is running very active, and there are currently one or more organized systems that we are monitoring closely. The primary concerns for the active systems are impacts on the Hawaiian island chain and the western coast of Mexico. If you're in Hawaii, This is a situation to take seriously. Tropical systems in the Central Pacific can intensify rapidly in favorable sea surface temperature conditions, and the 2026 El Niño has been warming Pacific waters. Monitor the Central Pacific Hurricane Center forecasts closely. The Hawaiian Islands have limited road networks and shelter capacity in rural areas. Preparing in advance is always the right call. For the Mexican Pacific coast from Manzanillo northward, watch the National Hurricane Center's Eastern Pacific advisories. Systems tracking toward this coast can bring heavy surf, dangerous rip currents, and significant rainfall even before reaching hurricane intensity. Atlantic Basin. Now let me address what I am seeing on social media and in some amateur weather channels. Claims of developing systems in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean that are going to affect the U.S. coast soon. I have reviewed the data, and I want to be clear. Those claims are not supported by the current analysis. The Atlantic Basin right now is running significantly below normal tropical activity. The reason is exactly what we have discussed in recent weeks. The 2026 Super El Niño is producing anomalously strong upper-level wind shear across the Caribbean and the tropical Atlantic. That wind shear is acting as a blanket, tearing apart any developing circulations before they can organize into named storms. There is no confirmed or forecast tropical development in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean at this time that poses a threat to the U.S. coastline. This does not mean the Atlantic season is over or that it will remain quiet forever. El Niño suppresses activity. It does not eliminate it. A few significant Atlantic storms are still possible this season, but the current data does not support the alarm being generated in some corners of social media. Trust the official National Hurricane Center advisories. If something real is developing, they will tell you about it promptly. Let's recap everything we covered today on Planet Brief. The Omega Block is the dominant feature right now, keeping some areas dry, trapping flooding rain in Montana and the Deep South, and fueling severe weather along its southern edge across the plains and Midwest. Record heat and dangerous fire weather in Oklahoma and West Texas this week. Flooding risk in the northern Rockies and the Gulf South. Looking ahead, Typhoon Jingi recurves in the West Pacific and injects energy into the North Pacific jet stream over the next week to 10 days, eventually building a West Coast ridge and reshaping the late June pattern to bring a renewed severe weather window to the central U.S. On the tropics, keep watching the East Pacific for Hawaii and Mexico impacts. The Atlantic is quiet, and the rumors of imminent Gulf storms are not backed by the data. That is your complete June 2026 forecast from Planet Brief. If this coverage was useful to you, and I genuinely hope it was, please take 5 seconds right now and hit the subscribe button. Planet Brief is free. It always will be. Sharing this video is the single most powerful thing you can do to help us reach someone who needs this information before the next event hits their area. I will have an updated forecast tomorrow with the latest model runs on the Omega Block timing and the first refined look at Typhoon Jingi's downstream impact. I will see you then. Stay safe, stay informed.